Borderlands is a video game series that has been going on since 2009. I just couldn't get into the games when I tried playing them. I played some of the first game and less of the second, and they're just meh to me. You know, one thing that is not meh though is this band, whose most popular song, we'll get to that, appeared in the intro sequence of Borderlands 2, making many people like the band despite that song coming out a year before the first game's release. Shame on you, humanity. Shame on you all. Anyway, Cage the Elephants. They hail from Kentucky and have been around for just over a decade now, and in that span of time, they've put out some really good stuff. And I'm about to tell you what's good, and if you think I'm just talking shit. That is, after all, the purpose of this series. This is Backtracking, and this time it's Cage the Elephant. Let's get this on like Donkey Elephant Kong. We start with their self-titled debut, and holy buggering Buddha is at a great start. The album was first released in the UK in 2008 through Relentless Records, then March of 2009 in the US through RCA and the Jive Music label group. That doesn't change the song order or listing in any way, but I felt like it was worth mentioning. It was produced by a dude named J. Joyce, who, from what I've looked up, is better known for recording pop artists like Carrie Underwood and such. To have someone of that caliber producing the debut of a garage rock / punk blues band, it works shockingly well, actually. The album actually feels like a big thing because of that, and it feels like a debut should. It's got all the right flavourings with the production complementing the essence of the band's style. They just mix things up so well and can experiment brilliantly. We'll get more into that later though. And the production truly gives things that style of feeling like garage rock. And it's really well produced, written and performed garage rock at that. The album is their shortest at around 36.5 minutes, and a lot of goodness is fitted perfectly into that time frame. There's so much energy on this album, it's just super infectious and gets into your head and stays there. Let's gloss over the band members as is customary among my people. Lead vocalist Matt Schultz, his brother Brad on rhythm guitar, Jared Champion on drums, really awesome surname, Daniel Tishnor, I think I'm pronouncing that right, on bass and backing vocals, and Lincoln Parrish on lead guitar. All of them sound great. What I like is that there's less of a chug to their sound and more of a groove. It's a nice change of pace for me, considering the bands I normally have been covering for the series. Then again, maybe I just saying because I cover way too much metal and hardcore on this channel. I should probably take more breaks from that. Anyway, yes, the band members play off of each other really well. Matt's vocals just sound brilliant. He's got this kind of drawl to him that I guess is helped by the fact that he's from Kentucky. His lyrics are also cool too, able to tell little stories, which actually goes really well with his bluesy style of singing. He can also scream pretty well, and his more punk rock chops are nothing to sneeze at either, but yeah. Lincoln's guitar just sounds great, as does Brad's, with the former providing awesome leads and great effects, as well as stellar guitar solos, and the latter helping along with the more paced-out style of that, blending the two accents together greatly. Daniel's bass has a deep burning groove to it, which helps drive the force of some of the songs, and Jared's drumming just feels very jazzy. He's got this really good timing to him that meshes well with everyone else. Standout songs include Ain't No Rest for the Wicked, there it is, are you happy I mentioned it now? God. In One Ear, Back Against the Wall, Judas, The Great Collision and Free Love, and probably my favourite, and Backstabbing Betty. Sorry, I had to take a breath there. Cage the Elephant's self-titled intro is a great way to introduce themselves indeed, combining great lyricism and production with awesome riff, drumming, bass work, and Matt Schultz's, I hope I'm saying his surname correctly there, intense vocal delivery. I can highly recommend it. Well, I know I'm saying his surname right, but Schultz's. Let's move on. We then reached their second album in Thank You, Happy Birthday. It was released in early 2011, was produced by J. Joyce once again, and released through Drive in the US, Relentless in the UK, and Universal in Canada. And to be honest, I don't quite know how to feel about this album. It's their longest one at around 40 minutes, and despite the positive reviews that it's gotten, I just have more of a mixed feeling towards it. I don't hate it, but at the same time, I'm not fully sure that I enjoy it as much as I did their debut. They keep their punk rock blues sound, adding elements of indie and noise rock, but the thing about noise rock is, as a rule, it sounds fucking awful because, well, it's just noise. Everything sounds a bit weird, and despite the band's claims that they wanted each song of this album to sound different, most of the songs do wind up sounding similar because of the noise rock influences. Not all of them do, thankfully. I don't mind the abrasive sound of the album, but for me to like it, I need to understand what's happening. And some of the album just winds up as a rambling, incoherent mess, and as good as Matt is as a vocalist with that really awesome-sounding crooning drawl of his vocals sound really imbalanced here. There's more screaming from him, which is good, but when it's as noisy as the rest of the instruments, it sounds a lot messier than it should be. The production doesn't help either. Most of it just seems to undersell how good the band can be, and it feels like J. Joyce just kind of does a half-assed job most of the time. Having said all that, there is actually some stuff to like on the album, mostly the much lighter tone tracks. See, their first album had a balance of that with the heavy stuff, combining their blues, punk, and garage sounds greatly. Here, trying to mix punk, blues, and noise just doesn't work well, but when they're not focusing so much on the noise, they actually sound pretty fantastic. And I'm not saying that it's slower tracks because there's really not any, but they're just much better paced than the rest of the album, and they're easier to understand in comparison to the rougher stuff. Matt's vocals are a lot easier to decipher and listen to when it comes to that, and mixing in some indie stuff helps, as much as I don't like that genre, but it works for Cage the Elephant on this album. Sure, I don't like indie, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done well. It just means that it can only be done well by bands who don't sound bored as shit when they're playing it. Ugh. There are some stellar riffs from Parrish and Brad. Joe's drumming's okay, and Daniel's bass still sounds pretty good. As rough as Cage the Elephant's sound here, at least they don't sound bored, even if things do drag on a little bit. Standout songs include 2024, Aberdeen, Rubber Ball, Right Before My Eyes, and possibly my favourite, Shake Me Down. All in all, Thank You Happy Birthday isn't terrible, but I just felt like it was a little bit of a mess. I can't really recommend it, but at the same time I can't stop you from listening to it yourself, so give it a shot. It just really wasn't for me though. Thankfully, we go from something a bit too rough around the edges to something much lighter toned in their third album, Melophobia. Released in 2013, there are a lot of changes for this album. Firstly, the label, which is just RCA. Secondly, this is the last album that Jay Joyce would produce for the band. And finally, it's the last album to feature lead guitarist Lincoln Parrish. The album is also a bit more experimental, as is the nature of the band's sound, adding some elements of psychedelic rock. In fact, it sounds a bit more like that in places. Whilst the intro is a bit uneasy to get through, the rest of the album is quite enjoyable. It's a pull on the reins, but it's not a super harsh one. The band are surprisingly loose while also showing a bit more restraint, which doesn't make sense, I know, but stick with me. There are more keyboards this time around, as some of the later tracks include the usage of a saxophone, a trombone, and a trumpet. There's also a guest appearance as singer Alison Mosshart appears on the track It's Just Forever. In the band's words, the album was an attempt to find their own distinct musical identity. I'll put it simply. Melophobia is a Cage the Elephant album with a punk blues sound mix of psychedelic elements and less traditional rock. Also, I failed to mention, but melophobia means fear of music. I hope I don't contract it like I do with that one thing about being watched by a duck. Ugh. I still have nightmares about that. Anyway, let's move on. The album, like I said, is pretty ambitious, and it lays out a good sound for the bands. They're always experimenting, and while sometimes that can mean a band doesn't know what to do with themselves, that is not the case here. Experimentation can either work wonders or it can just be a shit sandwich. Thankfully, it's the former here, so hooray, hooray. Matt's vocals are clearer than ever, without any screams, and his harsher vocals are present, but he never just full-on screams, and he strikes a really, really good balance with it. Despite this being his last album, Jay Joyce does produce it really well, adding some more layers but not really sacrificing the band's core sound. Lincoln Parrish and Brett Schultz both put in some really good riffs. Joe's drumming is really good and well timed as always, and Daniel's bass and backing vocals are great as well. I think that he does more backing vocals for this album than the others, and I can hear his voice a bit better when he's singing in melody with Matt. Also, I like the title and the cover art. It's just a weird looking thing, but it's cool. Standout songs include Teeth, Come a Little Closer, Take It or Leave It, The Great Closer and Cigarette Daydreams, and my standout in Black Widow. Melophobia is a really good step in the right direction, with infectious choruses, really good lyrics, experimentation that works well, and great production. I can recommend this one. And we bring this to a stop as we reach their fourth and most recently released album, Tell Me I'm Pretty. Released in late 2015, this thing got a 2017 Grammy for Best Rock Album, and I think that's pretty dope. Anyway, the album was released on RCA once again. In exchange of Jay Joyce as producer, we now have Dan Auerbach, who I think I'm pronouncing his surname right, who does a really good job. His style of production is a lot different to Joyce's, adding many more effects and making things sound less rough, and it really pays off well. Tell Me I'm Pretty is a good follow-up to Melophobia in terms of sound, with things being much lighter in tone once more, but it makes for a well-balanced album all in all. Speaking of Dan, he provides some extra guitar, keyboards, and backing vocals for this album, as do new lead guitarist and backing vocalist Nick Bockrath, and keyboardist, guitarist, and backing vocalist Matthew Minster. The latter two soon become the unofficial fifth and sixth members of the band respectively, as they are touring members, but I think they've been with the band proper long enough to be official. That'd just be cool. Anyway, the album sound, it's a bit more Beatles flavoured, and the first single release got them comparisons to Black Keys, but I'd much rather they Cage the Elephant sound like the Beatles than those hipster douche nozzles who look bored on the cover of every magazine that they grace. Anyway, yeah, even with those sound comparisons, Cage the Elephant is still very much Cage the Elephant, with strong songwriting and just much better production this time around. For this album in particular, they wanted to focus more on the emotion and be as transparent as possible so that they could gauge the best reaction from fans of them. It clearly worked well considering that it won them a fucking Grammy, and it even caught my ear a little bit. The album is their most charming, I feel. There's a bit more of a garage rock vibe, but less of a punk blues vibe, and it shows that the band can change their souls on a dime and still sound how they should. Cage the Elephant continue to take risks and can pull off pretty much everything that they do, no pun intended. It's another example of great experimentation being pulled off beautifully. Matt's lyrics even sound like they're telling stories again, much like they did in Malephobia and their debut. Even with the album's more laid-back tone, the band never really pull any punches lyrically. The two new members perform greatly. Brad's guitar sounds more layered with lighter tones, Joe's drumming adds a lot more, and Daniel's bass gets a lot of time to shine, which I quite like, as do Nick and Mathan and even Dan. They provide some good stuff as well. Yeah. Yeah, Daniel, the bass is really good on the 4-string as always. Standout songs include Crybaby, Sweetie Little Jean, Punching Bag, The Great Colours in Portuguese, Knife Fight. Oh, crap. I missed a bit. The lyric... Yeah, his lyrics, Matt's lyrics, they convey those messages of the songs greatly. And considering that one of those messages is about someone getting revenge for being domestically abused, it's pretty powerful stuff. Even with the album's more laid-back tone, the band never pull punches lyrically. I think I said the same thing twice, but I don't care. The two new members perform greatly, everyone else really performs well, which I like. Standout songs include Crybaby, Sweet Little Jean, Punching Bag, The Great Colours in Portuguese, Knife Fight, yes, that is an awesome title, and the standout of all of them is Too Late to Say Goodbye. It's a really rather enjoyable album, it's greatly produced, and it's a good mixing pan of sounds that the band switches around effortlessly. I can recommend this one. Also, I quite like the cover of it, it's just really nice. So that's it for yet another episode. Sorry for the slight thing near the end of Tell Me I'm Pretty there, that was weird. My favourite was, even with all the nice things I said about the last two albums, I think my favourite might be their debut. Tell Me I'm Pretty is a close second. My least favourite is possibly Thank You Happy Birthday. It's not fully bad, but it's just too harsh around the edges for my liking, and it's imbalanced despite the decent performances otherwise. Anyway, yeah, join me next time for episode 10. It'll be a 2-part episode as I'll be covering Yellow Card. Oh, yes. I'll see you all then. Take care, and thanks for listening.